BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're going back to 2014 to discuss the Isla Vista shooting that happened near Santa Barbara, California. And this left 6 people dead and various other people were injured, talking about the case of Elliot Rodger. Now, this is something that I've cited and referenced on the channel previously, but we haven't done a sole upload devoted just to Elliot Rodger, because he is a little bit different than some of the other mass shooters, because I was even just looking at some videos and some articles about what are they saying about Elliot Rodger prior to recording this, and there's just still set on this thing, journey into the killer's mind. What was he thinking? What was leading up and building up to this mass shooting that took place in 2014? And if you followed some things on the channel, you would know that I'm not the biggest fan of that interpretation, journeying into the mind of the perpetrator. But the thing with Elliot Rodger is he wrote it all out in a manifesto called My Twisted World, which should still be up on the internet. You see, it's like, the reason why I'm not so big on journeying into the mind of a killer is because it comes to a certain point where you're just trying to unravel the thinking of a madman, and then there's the answer to a lot of these things is just, there was a very deranged person, there was a very, I was about to say messed up, but yes, you could say that one, although deranged is perhaps the kind of better adjective to use. So, okay, I mean, then that's just the kind of answer is, you're dealing with a person who had a lot of mental and psychological issues, they were very deranged, and they don't have any sort of clear and cogent thought process at all. It's just all messed up, for lack of a better term. But the thing is, though, with somebody like Elliot Rodger, he did provide all the explanations about why. He's like, okay, I committed this mass shooting, and now these people are dead, and here's why. Not only do we have the manifesto My Twisted World, but also Elliot Rodger's YouTube videos that he posted and that have been shared around on various channels, giving explanations about why he committed this killing. In the videos, he talks about how he is very angry at women, but he doesn't appear too angry. He actually appears somewhat calm and collected in the videos, talking about how he was just very angry, dissatisfied, disappointed with women for rejecting him. And this was 2014, once again, May 23rd, 2014, and that's talking about just how we saw the rise of something called the Incel movement. Incel meaning involuntary celibate. People who are kind of in the desire of having a full-on adult relationship, but are being rejected just because they are just kind of deemed unworthy, or they're just being rejected for some reason. They're people who are celibate, but not by choice because society has pushed them this way. And Elliot Rodger was kind of like sort of a pioneer for that. As far as I know, he came before the incel movement, and he was kind of a catalyst that put it into motion. So he never used the word incel to describe himself, once again meaning involuntary celibate. The thing is, though, when My Twisted World was put out on the internet, I found out about the Isla Vista shooting in 2015, actually. I guess I missed it in the news, and I didn't know about it until 2015, and instantly when I saw something about My Twisted World, the manifesto being available on the internet, and I just stayed up all night reading it until probably 3 o'clock in the morning. I read it in one read, the whole thing, which is like somewhere between 100 and 200 pages, if I recall. But the thing is, I didn't see a single picture of Elliot Rodger. I mean, I just pulled his name out of an article or something like that, and then I was just like, I wanted to see what he looked like, so I put him into Google, and I was really quite surprised. He looked nothing like what I had imagined. I was thinking about someone who was smaller, maybe a little bit overweight, definitely maybe just, well, less attractive, for lack of a better term. And he says this in some of his videos, which I went on to watch, that he sees himself as a very attractive individual, but that women are rejecting him because they are preferring obnoxious and brutish characteristics in other men, as well as just, he also says that sometimes he just doesn't know why women are not attracted to him. But one of the heart and soul pieces of My Twisted World and the videos, and just the message that Elliot Rodger was really conveying to people, is that he was frustrated because of sexual issues. And this really just sparks a giant question. How much of that is true? How much does sexual frustration play in the mental awareness issue? How much does sexual frustration play in just human psychology? Sigmund Freud obviously thought it was very important, right? But when it comes to actually talking about the motivations for mass shootings, very few newscasters and commentators and even the psychologists and experts that they bring on to discuss these things will want to talk about sexual frustration. Is it because it's a taboo, or is it because there is something else that is going on? I mean, he wrote the entire thing, this book-length thing here, My Twisted World. He's telling in all the videos that why is he committing this shooting? Because of sexual frustration. Yet, when it comes to discussing mental awareness in our current sphere of education, most people just do not want to do that. Most people are just terrified of it because it's awkward, and once again, it's somewhat of a taboo. There's kind of this, social stigma that is against it. Now, there were a few documentaries that were going on about Elliot Rodger that were kind of made by YouTube users, like web-based documentaries, which are more just there's lots of text that is written on the screen. It's almost just like PowerPoint presentations that have been uploaded. I think a lot of them have been taken down. I was watching one, though, that was from the channel Bulldog Mindset, and it was a fairly good one. It's factually accurate, I can say that much, but some of the commentary that the guy was putting out on that channel were some things that I would take somewhat of an exception with, because the first thing that he does is he doesn't seem to completely accept that Elliot Rodger was completely a mentally deranged individual who just had some intense psychological issues, who was far out and didn't have a clear thought process. I don't think that he was completely aware of that, because he's all like, oh, Elliot Rodger wants to be loved, but he's not doing the things that will allow him to be loved. And it's like, well, yes, of course, he was deranged. And even the Incel movement is trying to distance themselves from Elliot Rodger. They're sort of putting out new things after these mass shootings, saying that, no, it can't be tied to Elliot Rodger. Things like 4chan and the Incel movement are just saying he is not a hero. He is not someone that people look up to. He is actually viewed as more of a clown. That's their response to these things. But at the same time, they could just be toning down the rhetoric. But one of the biggest things with Elliot Rodger is that he didn't only target women. He said he was very angry at women. He said he was very angry at men who were living more prosperous lives than him, more active lives than him. But at the same time, though, the first 3 victims of Elliot Rodger were his roommates that were stabbed to death in his apartment. George Chen, age 19, Chong Yuen Hong, otherwise known as James, age 20, and David Wang, all age 20. And these guys, and this isn't my own observation, someone else brought up this excellent point, like when they were asking, how much did Elliot Rodger believe what he was saying, or was he just some guy who was like a far-out deranged maniac, and for lack of a better term? And the answer is he was a deranged maniac, because he killed these 3 guys, George Chen, James Hong, and David Wang, who had nothing to do with his movement. He killed them because he didn't like them, because he thought they were disgusting, and also because he was a racist. Elliot Rodger talks very clearly about how he believes that white people are superior. He was biracial himself, half Asian, half Caucasian, and he just was using white supremacy as a way to just kind of to let out frustration. But once again, there isn't an enormously clear and cogent thought process. But he killed these 3 people who had nothing to do with his movement. They had nothing to do with any of this incel stuff. They had nothing to do with having more partners than him. They had nothing to do with being more prosperous individuals than him. They had nothing to do with being superior or inferior to him in any quantifiable way. He killed them because he didn't like them. And I believe it was actually with the 3rd victim, was either James Hong or David Wong. One of them was stabbed over 90 times. One of them would enter the apartment, Elliot Rodger would just start stabbing him, and then he would clean up the blood and make it look like everything was normal, and then wait for the next person to come back, and then he would, of course, attack them. After that happened, Elliot Rodger drove to Starbucks and ordered some coffee. This is what I mentioned about how he just says he's very just kind of calm and nonchalant about all of this. It's like he killed his 3 roommates, and then he drove to a Starbucks, ordered coffee, and made a YouTube video in the car. And it's like, I think there's a little bit of an indifference going on there. And the two major things that people talk about with the Elliot Rodger Isla Vista shooting are narcissism and sense of entitlement disorder. We've talked a lot about narcissism on this channel, but sense of entitlement disorder is more like believing that, society owes you something, believing that women owe you something, which is really the thing that Elliot Rodger focused on. He believed that women should be with him because he thought he was superior to all other men. He thought he was very attractive. He says this very clearly in My Twisted World, that he believes that he is a very well-read, very well-educated person, done by his own self-education. He was never a successful student in, he was never a successful student, we can just say that, but what he did was he would sit in a Barnes & Noble, which is something I guess we used to do at the time, not too frequently anymore, and he would just kind of self-educate himself through reading. Okay, but the thing that was going on with something like that is that a lot of people really try to kind of focus in on some things and perhaps misinterpret certain details about Elliot Rodger by saying that he wanted women to have sex with him because he saw them doing things with other men. He was like, therefore he deserved it. This is a sense of entitlement disorder, kind of in a nutshell, right? He believed that they should be doing things with him sexually because he saw them doing things with other men. And if I recall from reading My Twisted World, although it's been a couple years, and just listening to the videos and looking through some articles right now today, it's like, I think there's something that they're overlooking. What he was saying is that women should be with him because he is superior to the men that they are choosing. And once again, he referred to himself as the supreme gentleman. And I believe in My Twisted World, he also says, though, that there needs to be a leader of the earth who needs to be worshipped as a god. And of course, he's talking about himself. I believe the actual line is just someone who needs to be worshipped as a god, someone such as myself. In short, he thought that he was just the most supreme human being in the world. And this is kind of a big result of just very intense antisocial personality issues. And he's spending most of his time by himself, so he's not really being challenged, he's not really arguing his case for life, he's just only living with it inside himself. The concept of lone wolfism leading to strange behavior, and that's not a profound statement. I mean, some people bring it up from time to time, but yes, lone wolfism by definition is strange because it is contrary to the social norm. And that's just what you have with Elliot Rodger. Just a lot of bizarre and destructive behavior that is once again contrary to the major social norms. Okay, though, so where does that leave us? He says that in his YouTube video that he's filming in the car, his final video, that he is going to go to the hottest sorority of University of California, Santa Barbara, and he's going to just exact his revenge, get his day of retribution by killing as many of them as he can, and then he's going to go out into the city and just kill as many people as he can. But once again, though, if he's just killing innocent people, then what on earth does this have to do with any sort of movement other than the fact he's not targeting women for rejecting him, he's not targeting men for having things that he doesn't have. He's just a mentally deranged individual. And he really talks about this as well in the manifesto, so saying certain things like he sees a group of people playing kickball and he gets so frustrated because men are interacting with beautiful women. So he goes to a store and he buys a super soaker and he fills it full of orange juice, and then he just starts squirting them with orange juice. And he says like a warm hatred came over him, warm hatred of pleasure or something like that comes over him as he's kind of just spraying them and soaking them with orange juice. And it's like, well, these are the things, though. It's like, obviously, he wasn't really putting in any actual effort to be involved in a relationship with women. He wasn't making any effort to socialize with people at all. And that's one of the more confusing things about the case of Elliot Rodger. You have this guy who's putting out these YouTube videos and written this entire book-length manifesto about how he is angry at women for rejecting him sexually, but he's also not putting in an ounce of effort into trying to interact with people in any constructive way. And this is why people talk a lot about narcissism and sense of entitlement disorder with the case of Elliot Rodger. They're just like, he said that he wanted to be with women, but he didn't try in the smallest way to actually be with a woman. And he also probably didn't look up any sort of resources about how to get a girlfriend other than using money. He thought that if he were able to become a screenwriter or win the lottery, then he could use money to attract women. But, I mean, that is a very naive thing to do. And most people kind of grow out of that. by their mid-20s, they recognize that someone is not going to be with you just because you have money. I mean, like, why on earth would they want to do that? It's like more about how they benefit from you. I mean, like that is true about those like kind of financially based relationships. No one's just going to be attracted. Oh, he has lots of money that I don't have access to. No one's even going to care about that at all. But when you're really examining some of the other sort of things about what drove Elliot Rodger to kill, definitely lack of bonding with his parents. Seems like he had somewhat of a kind of scorn for his mother. I did notice, though, that he definitely had a bad relationship with his stepmother, but his father, who was involved with the filmmaking business, who was an assistant director on The Hunger Games, seemed like Elliot Rodger had some sort of respect for him because he said very clearly that he could not bring himself to kill his father. And it's like, I mean, even if you want to view that as a deranged form of respect, I mean, it still seems like though there is an enormous amount of a lack of bonding that is going on with Elliot Rodger and his parents, and just not having their approval, not having their acceptance. And I say this for a variety of reasons. Most notably that there are just a lot of very kind of humiliating and degrading experiences that he talks about in My Twisted World. Some of it sounds like it's right out of a teenage drama that you could be watching on television. Like he gets his first job, and then after it's completed, he goes over to his father's house to tell him about the job that he just did and how everything was a big success. And then his father and his stepmother throw him out of the house because he didn't knock when he entered the door. Like those things, like those are actually real life teenage experiences. And Elliot Rodger went through a lot of real life teenage experiences. Not getting laid is one of them. But one of the things is he didn't really have any sort of awareness about how to deal with the situation. And somebody, and once again in one of those kind of web-based documentaries that I saw a couple of years ago, just said, what would have happened if he actually had the opportunity to be with a woman? I mean, what really would have happened? I mean, like, I don't really think that he would have ever even been able to perform any sort of intercourse with her. He probably would have had a nervous breakdown and committed suicide, and I'm not really trying to be funny or anything like that. But that really is just goes to show you that it's not only about what the person is saying, and that is not only about the kind of words of the deranged person. And so many people are just trying to analyze the philosophy of Elliot Rodger, the ideology. What was he trying to convey? Well, I mean, he was someone who had a very low state of mental awareness. Not mental illness yet. We're talking about mental awareness, about how to cope with things like frustration, how to deal with things like anger, how to deal with things like being rejected. And there are very few resources that actually talk about the concept of rejection from society in connection with sexual frustration. And they really just do not want to explore that concept at all. Just about, and one of the things that I did notice, though, like once again I was watching the channel Bulldog Mindset, and they're talking more about how they sort of only expect certain personalities to act in certain ways. Like just because some guy is like a jock on the football team in high school, it's more often than not he would be a nice person, and I don't accept that. I don't think that you can make any sort of determination like that. Because the guy from Bulldog Mindset continued to say that it's the small groups that, like, the small groups and cliques can often be nastier. I don't accept that either. I think that is way too, it's way too micromanaging of personality to say that only, like, these small groups will act in this way and athletes will act in this way. There are jerks in all shades and colors, and there are nice people in all shades and colors, no matter what social group you're interacting with. I'm not trying to be politically correct or anything. That's just real life. I mean, you're going to deal with assholes who are from various backgrounds, who are involved with various activities, and you'll meet, like, the nicest, most supportive friends that you can have from various backgrounds and activities. Like, there's no pattern or way that you can predict it. And someone like Elliot Rodger completely did not understand that. But once again, he was somebody who was so broken that it wasn't about anything. And this is the thing that we notice with serial killers and other mass shooters. We've talked about it a lot on this channel in terms of true crime and development and how this shapes the psychological process. It's not even about getting what you want. I mean, multiple serial killers have said that they have committed their actions because of rejection from society and feeling like they were humiliated by women and such. But at the same time, just they're often married, they often have children, they often have a stable life. Getting what they want doesn't actually bring them peace and security. It really doesn't, because their personality is so broken, their mindset is so shattered, their psychological state of mental awareness is so far removed that all they know how to do is destroy. It has nothing to do with about getting what they want. It's like they're a broken person. And I really hate to be one of those people that talks in analogies and metaphors all the time, but like if you had a bottle, like a glass bottle, and you dropped it on the floor and it shattered into like a whole load of pieces. Let's say, for example, you took half the pieces and you kind of were able to glue it back together, but then the other half of the bottle is still just a bunch of broken glass shards all over the floor. That thing is still broken. It might be somewhat back together and it might be a little bit better than it was before, but it's still broken. Just because you can kind of just because the people that we're talking about here, like Elliot Rodger or some of the major serial killers in the United States of America, are kind of able to get what they want, to get a stable relationship, to get approval. Even when we were talking about John Wayne Gacy, one of the major motivations that drove him to become a serial killer was lacking the approval of his father. And then he finally got it once he became a businessman and got married. But once again, that's just like gluing half the shards of a broken bottle back together. It's still broken, and it will never be completed. And the same way you can never just pick up every single little fragment of glass that fell on the floor. There's always going to be some broken things. And that's kind of where we are with the case of Elliot Rodger. He was beyond repair. And he, of course, died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head on the day of the Isla Vista shooting. Right now, I would just like to kind of just say like some words to the victims. We mentioned Wong Hai-wan and Chung Yuan Hong, George Chen. The other three victims that died as a result of Elliot Rodger were Catherine Cooper, shot 8 times, and Veronica Weiss, shot 7 times, and Christopher Michaels Martinez was shot 1 time in the chest. I believe Christopher Michaels Martinez was the person that he shot while Elliot Rodger was driving around. Of course, he tried to knock on the door of the sorority, but no one answered, so then he shot 2 people on the street. One of them was actually a girl that had survived cancer as a kid, only to be murdered by Elliot Rodger. Then I believe he was driving his car, and he shot Christopher Michaels Martinez when he was walking out of a deli, or he was in the doorway of a deli, rather, and 14 other people were injured. As a result of Elliot Rodger's activities, which not only included shooting, but also trying to injure people by running them over with his car. And once again, I'd like to thank the channel Bulldog Mindset for giving us some things to talk about. Also read some things from the Wikipedia page, and I wish I could cite the titles of the documentaries that I had seen in the past, but they've since been taken down. Also want to cite ABC News and even, of course, citing as well My Twisted World that Elliot Rodger had written himself. But right now, I would just like to say that's the end of our upload for today. If you have anything to say at all about this case, please drop a comment below. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button. And if you want any cases covered on this channel, what would you like to hear about? I would love to hear from you. Until next time.